With the World Championship match now officially over, I wanted to take a look at all 11 games and highlight some of the brilliant moves that were played. In order to stay objective, I'm going to be using chess.com's engine analysis and what they classify a brilliant move to be. So brilliant move number one actually occurred in game number one, and we reached a position that looked something like this. Jan has the white pieces, and there's quite a lot of tension between the queens, between maybe the queen and the bishop as well, and black has a very serious threat in this position. If we pass the move by playing a random move, you can see the eval bar drop significantly because black has this move queen takes e5, and the rook is undefended, meaning that, well, if rook takes queen first of all, then bishop takes f3, and I mean, black is much better here. The rook is under attack, so if you take, you're going to lose your rook. And if instead queen takes bishop, the whole point is the rook is undefended here, and this is not only winning, it's actually checkmate here because the bishop guards h2. So this really clears up the situation a little bit. White has to do something about this tension, and white chose the brilliant way to do it. King to f1, simply defending the rook, and therefore queen takes e5 is no longer a threat. If queen takes e5, white can very comfortably take on b7. Now the queen is under attack, and the whole point is queen takes e1 is no longer possible. Now another thing that is quite nice about this move is the king doesn't really want to be on the king side. The king side is very unsafe here with all of these diagonals and potential to attack on the king side. So this move also signifies potential to walk the king over to the queen side later in the game, which is, if you recall, exactly what happened, and I'll show it here. A few moves later, some pieces were traded off, both players maneuver their pieces quite nicely, and now the king starts to walk over to the queen side, and this walk continues until here, and the king is actually much safer here. So this was brilliant move number one. Now let's move on to game number two. Now here, the engine actually doesn't show a brilliant move in this position, but when I did look at this game around a week and a half ago when it actually happened, there was indeed a brilliant move here. I think, I'm not sure, if I'm being honest, why the engine changed its mind, but I thought I'd still show it because at one point the chess.com engine did classify this as a brilliant move, and it happened right around here. You can already see that this knight here on d6 is a very, very powerful piece, and black is very much struggling here if this knight remains on the board. There's a lot of key squares that this knight is controlling in black's camp, which really makes this move rook takes d6 very appealing. Now here you can see it's the best move, but once again, a week and a half ago when this game was played, this was classified as a brilliant move. And the whole point is you're giving away an exchange, but you're taking one of white's most serious pieces, and you're leaving yourself in a position where black has great control over open files, and white doesn't have as many good attacking ideas. So this whole idea of sacrificing the exchange Petrosian style is something that you definitely want to add into your games when necessary. So this was game number two. Now in game number three, there was no brilliant move, and similarly in game number 4 and also 5, there were no brilliant moves. But in game number 6, here, Magnus with the white pieces, there was indeed one brilliant move, and it happened right here. Rook takes a3. Now this game was indeed quite the game. It was the longest game ever played in a World Championship match. It was also the first decisive result, so this was definitely a huge game in the match, and this is definitely one of the big moments of the game. Here, white took a pawn on a3, seemingly giving away an exchange again, similar to the previous position. Now here, black continued by taking on h4, and after the king moves, bring that back the queen from danger because the king is no longer pinned, so the queen was now attacked. But you might be wondering, well, why didn't black just take the exchange? Well, the point is, after takes, you can see that the eval bar did go a little bit better for white now, because although white's pieces might not seem that impressive, black has quite a lot of weaknesses, and this rook, you can imagine, landing itself on really any one of these squares could cause some damage to the black structure here and could be very, very hard to deal with. It's actually one of those positions where the knight and rook combo is simply better than this single queen here, because the queen can never really put pressure on this only weak square. The king can always just defend, while these pieces have much more potential to attack, because what it comes down to is black's pawn structure is much, much worse, and that justifies giving away a rook, giving away the exchange, taking away one of black's nicest piece on this dark diagonal. So this was, again, a very brilliant idea, as the engine shows, and I thought it was definitely worth understanding and maybe implementing into your own game. Game 7 and Game 8 also no brilliant moves. Game 9 likewise. Game 10 as well. And now we get to the final game, and the final game did end in a very brilliant manner. There was actually 2 instances of brilliant moves here, both by Magnus Carlsen. The first one is right here. And we reached a similar, well, not a similar, but we reached an interesting position here, that black has a huge dilemma. The move g3 was just played, and as you can see, this is a horrible move. But the rook doesn't have any great squares to go to, and black decided to continue the attack, punish this move, because what it does is it weakens this king greatly, and the way you punish it is by, funnily enough, giving away the exchange once more. So we see some commonalities between these brilliancies. But the point is, after white takes back the rook, the pawn structure, like I just mentioned, is much more weakened, and queen takes g4, and black totally infiltrates. I mean, you can definitely imagine the rook coming in, the knight coming in. It's basically game over. The king is totally naked on the king side. Now, later in the game, as I explained, there was actually another brilliant move, and this one happened really towards the end of the game. There was another nice sacrifice, and it happened right here. Now, the point is, this rook has an incredibly important role guarding over h1. If the rook were to ever move upwards, the pawn would be able to promote with ease, and black would get a winning position. And black also does have to act with some sense of urgency. I mean, a5, a6, a7, white does have some counterplay in this position. So something like pushing the pawns, although perhaps possible, could also be very risky because it is a much slower approach. So Magnus found a very direct way to drag this rook away from its position, rook to b3 check. As you can see, the brilliant mark here on the board. And after rook takes, which is practically forced, otherwise you lose your rook, and then the queen promotes anyways. So rook takes rook, and now the rook has been dragged away. And after queen takes h1, this position is surprisingly annoying to deal with the black pieces, because somehow this configuration of pieces is quite safe here for white. But of course, the queen is always going to outpower here. And I'll play through the last moves. And in this position, white did indeed resign, because this pawn cannot push because you lose the rook, and all of white's pieces are falling, and black even has the ability and luxury to make some new queens. So hopefully you guys enjoyed looking through some of these scattered brilliancies throughout this match. I know a lot of people did not enjoy this match that much because it started very drawish and very boring, and then it became super one-sided. Maybe you were hoping for more of an even but exciting game, and although that did not happen, I do think there was a lot to learn from these matches. They were super instructive, and I thought also quite entertaining. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you next time. Peace out.